Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining from around the world. My name is James Elsmore. I am the CEO of Island Innovation, and it's my pleasure to join you on the third and final day of the Island Finance Forum to discuss the most important issues around financing sustainable development from islands around the world. And this week, you have heard a lot from many of the small island developing states and some of the specific issues facing regions like the Caribbean and the Pacific. But for this session, we are going slightly further north to the Orkney Isles. So I will invite our speaker to join us on screen. It's my pleasure to welcome Inga Burton, representing the Orkney Islands Council, and she is the Service Manager for Sustainable Regeneration and the Arctic. Inga, thank you for joining us. How is everything in Orkney today?
It's a little bit overcast and a little bit chilly, shall we say, or cold. So yeah, I think we're about 8 degrees at the moment. There's no wind, so we don't have too much of a wind still today. So that often makes it a bit colder. But thank you very much for having me, and looking forward to a conversation, James.
Likewise. So just to say hello to everyone who's joining us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We're streaming live there in addition to the people joining us here on Zoom. Do feel free to add in your questions to the Q&A once we get started. But maybe just to set the scene, Inga, you can start off by telling us a little bit about Orkney for those who might not be familiar, and also about your role at the Orkney Islands Council.
Absolutely. So Orkney is the first group of islands that you'll come to once you come off the north coast of the UK, Scottish mainland. So it's about 59 degrees north. We have a mainland Orkney, and we have around 70 islands altogether. About 20 of those are inhabited, populated, all the time, basically. So our economy is pretty mixed. I think that's one of our strengths as a community. Historically, we have a really strong sort of farming agriculture background. So we have Shetland Islands is just north of us. So we talk about Orcadians who as being individuals that farmers that fish, and we talk about Shetlanders being fishermen that farm. So there's a little bit of a difference there. So our agriculture sector, and you can see that when you visit or go online, there's lots of greenery. We have a very strong tourism economy as well, and strong natural resources, which we've really managed to develop, and we have a strong innovation and research sector as well. In terms of population, we're about 22,000. We're actually one of the communities that are reasonably strong, but we have quite an ageing population as well. And from an environmental perspective, a strong sort of breadth of protected areas at local, national and international level as well. My role, I suppose, would you like me to just give it? I'll do that. So my role, I've just recently started with Orkney Islands Council. So my role is Sustainable Regeneration and Arctic, so service manager there. And that covers 3 main areas. It includes what we refer to as the Islands Growth Deal. And it also covers sort of funding, external funding. And it also covers a sort of focus on international, and for Orkney, that includes our links and connections with the north and our northern neighbours in the North Atlantic and the Arctic.
Fantastic. And I will say Orkney has a special place for me as a proud alumni of the Institute for Northern Studies at the University of the Highlands and Islands based in Orkney. Although I was mostly studying remote while I was working in the Caribbean with my colleagues joining online in Orkney, but that actually was an important part of the development of island innovation, seeing how UHI, the University of the Highlands and Islands, approached development across this huge region of over 100 inhabited islands in Scotland, and then also seeing some of the parallels that these northern regions have to the small island states and other islands around the world. So That's Orkney's a very important place to me, and I hope that I get to get back there sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
It's been a while.
Absolutely.
I can see as well, we just did a poll. So from the people joining in Zoom, about half of you almost joining from Europe. And then I see others joining from North America and the Caribbean, Africa and the Middle East. Oh, Asia and the Pacific. So we have a pretty broad audience, about 40% from the private sector, and then others from academia, NGOs, and government. And then a pretty even mixture of people working in finance, environmental services, and government. So do say hello in the chat if you haven't already, so we know who else is joining here in the Zoom. And also if you're watching on social media, you can add a comment there. So Inga, let's get into it. Orkney has had some challenges, as have many of the other councils across Scotland and the UK, when it comes to funding over the recent years. But I think that the context for the island councils is particularly important. And for those who don't know, the three councils in Scotland that are made up of archipelagos, Shetland is also one of them, as Inga mentioned, and then also the Western Isles. So those three councils have a quite specific condition when it comes to local government in those regions, and really play a very important role. But Orkney and these other councils have had some challenges, and one of the mechanisms that was put in place to really provide for investment on those islands was the Islands Growth Deal. So can you tell us a bit about the Islands Growth Deal?
Yeah, absolutely, James. It was actually, it started through a process through UK government in partnership with the Scottish government as part of their kind of levelling up policy and agenda. So this was investment that went across the UK, but for the island groups of Orkney, Shetland, and the Western Isles. Then we were working as councils quite closely together, and the position that was taken was that we would do a joint islands growth deal. And so what we have in place is 100 million investment through the UK and Scotland, so that's 50-50 from both, and over a 10-year period, for specific projects that have been identified within the communities through processes through the islands. And then there's a process of delivery. So we have to take forward, full business cases aligned to the UK government Green Treasury Book process. And then, basically, implement those. So there's a whole range of projects across the three island groups that have been identified and are being taken forward. So for myself, then I focus on the Orkney specific, but we also have joint islands projects where the local authorities mixed with the universities and private and also third sector as well are working together and collaboratively around those areas.
Thank you. And so for Orkney, traditionally, a large amount of money and funding came from the European Union. And I guess it's important that there were three key levels of government in addition to the local government. You have the Scottish government, the UK government, and then previously the European Union. And so over the last few years, there's been quite a few changes in that funding landscape. Obviously, new programs like the Islands Growth Deal have come in to tackle that. But how has that affected the council and the programs, and what's the current situation like there?
Yeah, so just the same as it will be in many other areas, there's certain funding routes that, are not accessible. I suppose from the research and innovation, those kind of project areas are harder to access funds, although I understand it is possible now for the universities to access through Horizon, but there's still some funds there, like Northern Tripoli and Arctic, or these kind of funds that we still can't sort of get access to. So that's a shame, but there is, through the Levelling Up agenda, that the UK Share Prosperity Fund and such like, and we just had a surprise announcement just the other day that we would have 20 million investment into the town regeneration project as well. So that was a lovely surprise for Orkney. So there's definitely things coming through, and there's new processes that we have to work through and work together. So these types of funding will come directly to the local authority from UK government, which is a slight change from what it would have been, previously as well. So there's definitely processes, and there's definitely opportunities, and it's just kind of working through how we kind of access those and how efficient we can be, with identifying projects. And the growth deal, the opportunities to align these kind of funding opportunities with the growth deal projects as well is pretty key. So yeah.
Fantastic. So when it comes to development, sustainable development more broadly, what are the key areas of investments that have been happening or that the council would like to happen? Are we talking more about infrastructure? I know energy is a big project in Orkney, and of course, not all of these are led by the council. So I realize there may be other organizations that take a role in those. But in terms of the things that will be of interest in the broader sustainable development agenda, maybe you can just give us some ideas of those.
Absolutely. I can talk through a little bit more on the growth deal project specifically, and then a bit broader as well. So within the growth deal for Orkney, then we have a number of projects. So we have a project that is, most of these are capital projects, so these are building projects. One of these is the phased development of the Orkney Research Innovation Campus to support incubator space, entrepreneurship, commercialisation, building on the credentials and international status we've got on the back of the European Marine Energy Centre, the universities that we have here that are based there and growing as well. So that's one example. We have a refurbishment of an old facility, our former post office in Stromness, which is my hometown, that has been led by the Peer Arts Centre. So that's a Creative Islands Wellbeing project that looks at creating a pathway for, creative practitioners to come up through into that fine art. So almost like a sports club, you've got that kind of progression from young artists through to ones that are practicing in that fine art space. We also have a project that focuses on our UNESCO World Heritage Site. So this is, we have a UNESCO status site for our archaeology and key sites like Skara Brae, the Ring of Brodgar, Standing Stones of Stennis and Maes Howe. These are all protected sites. We've been very fortunate with our tourism industry. There is a number of opportunities on the back of that, but there's also a management aspect on making sure we safeguard the sites and the local environment. Also making sure we can, safeguard the experience and the importance of that landscape in its entirety. So we have projects there looking at transportation that's linked to net zero, active travel, interpretation, facilities within that area as well. And so that's really exciting. We also have a project that is focused on establishing a vertical farm in Orkney, so building on the agricultural sector and looking at that innovation and technology in there. So that has two key areas of focus. That includes a focus on being able to run that technology efficiently on renewables. So that aligns with our aspirations in terms of climate change. But also looking at the model in which that will be taken forward in terms of the business model. So often, when it's looking at how we can create new business models that would be viable and sustainable within our sort of small communities, whilst responding to the environmental and community aspects of that. So that's really exciting one as well. The other one we have is around the Future Fuels Hub. So this is looking at positioning Orkney in terms of future fuels for shipping. and looking at the technology that would be associated with that to be able to provide that from a shipping perspective moving forward. So those are the Orkney specific projects. There's also some, joint projects that we work on with the other 2 island communities, and they include one that's focused on the Island Centre for Net Zero. So this is really looking at providing the resource and support to help identify projects and opportunities that can help move our islands to net zero faster. So there's a joint programme there, and looks at data exchanges, community support and hubs, and this identification of projects that can help transition us quicker. And the final one is talented, and that involves the universities that actually have a footprint within Orkney. So that's Heriot-Watt University, Robert Gordon University, and the University of the Highlands and Islands. And this is looking at being able to deliver more opportunities for work-based learning within our islands. We have a large number of young people that will leave, the islands and often not get an opportunity to come back. So it's looking at how we can develop skills, but also entrepreneurship and commercialisation, as well as work-based innovation. So there's a real breadth of exciting projects, but I mentioned the funding aspect there earlier. And these projects are, they're part funded. There is a commitment to leverage in additional funding. And I see these projects as very much a catalyst, to start opportunities for our communities across the 3 island groups to form relationships that we can create more from these initial investments. So that kind of connects in with that international part as well.
Absolutely. And a lot of the challenges and opportunities you mentioned there will be familiar to people living in other islands in different parts of the world. And of course, one of the recurring themes when it comes to investment, the fundamental challenge is scale, which is, again, I think very important in Orkney. So I know that there is collaboration, as you mentioned, with the other Scottish Island councils, but also part of your role has been building that collaboration with other regions, neighboring regions in the Arctic and near Arctic, which I think is very interesting. So what opportunities does that give when it comes to driving investment for Orkney, and how do you look at trying to build those connections with other parts of the North Atlantic?
I think the thing that joins us is that shared geography, first and foremost. There's similarities, because of the geographical location, but also because of that remote island, whether it's land, and you can be an island within a land area, and cut off from other towns, and you have to get the boat or fly straight in and out. But it's that shared experiences that can join, those connections and join people together. And I think that's my experience of having engaged, and it will be the same through the island, groups and islands innovation. That shared geography challenges of that perception of remote, from out with, and that you can come together on those conversations. So very quickly, where the challenges are going to be, but also where the opportunities are. So I think that common themes allow us to kind of come together, and there's a sort of trust there, I feel. So the other aspect of that from an investment perspective is that impact, and we have seen a shift in terms of that interest in longer term maybe returns, and that environmental return, as well as and community return, as well as just a financial return. So how the interest there is, how can we engage more effectively with those organisations that have those shared values, and develop that trusting relationships in order that we can look at new ways of doing things, that put the community at the front and foremost within that. So I think it's quite an exciting time, that's very challenging at the moment for everybody, but often those these challenging times create opportunities. So I think if we're able to look at this as opportunities and come together through the likes of Islands Innovation, that those kind of networks, the opportunities should come. But yeah, there's definitely that impact. I think longer term investment, and possibly even like aggregation, so instead of just looking at one small item and looking, well, that's not going to work, therefore we're not interested, then, what is there, across a wider geography, whether it's within the islands or, wider still. So I think those kind of conversations would be really interesting and are really interesting. And yeah, there's definitely different models that we need to be looking at for the future.
Absolutely. And as we're mentioning sub-Arctic regions, I will just take a moment for our audience to mention the upcoming Island Innovation event in Canada, in the province of Prince Edward Island, happening in May, the Global Sustainable Island Summit. And we will have representatives joining from regions including the Nordic Council, Scotland, Ireland, around Canada, but of course the Caribbean, the Pacific, and so that really brings together some of these conversations. So for anyone who is joining virtually and has joined us previously virtually, we would love to see you in person. And Maria has just shared in the chat, and you'll also find on our website that there is a discount for anyone who is attending the Island Finance Forum, and that also you can buy your tickets there and find out more. So hopefully we will see some of you there in person in Canada, and more information is in the emails that were sent out to all guests who've registered for the forum. So Inga, in terms of private finance, I mean, we touched on that a little bit and the role there. What is the role of the council when it comes to attracting private finance, and what are some of the challenges but opportunities looking at bringing private finance to Orkney and the other Scottish Isles?
So I think the Orkney Islands Council is obviously a local government and local authority, and we have our private sector that's done amazing within Orkney, and really punches above our weight in terms of the size that we are, especially within the renewables and tourism industries and such like. But I think everyone's in the same position at the moment in terms of being able to resource and to provide services and deliver and meet the needs of the communities and create opportunities. So I think from my perspective, like reasonably new into the role, I'm looking at the moment just to do a bit of a landscape review in terms of where we sit within that space, and how the different actors within the community, whether that's a local authority, private, public, the volunteer sector, what roles can we play in terms of engaging more effectively to work with partners in different locations to see whether there's opportunities for investment and how best to go about that. So I think we're probably quite early on in terms of that from a council perspective, but certainly we've demonstrated certainly from our marine sort of testing and device and sort of excellence that sits there through the European Marine Energy Centre, and the ability to track that investment into Orkney as well through that. So it's not a new area for us, and there's definitely lots of skills and experience within that already. So, but it's quite an exciting area. So yeah, if there's anyone that's listening, just you know where to get me. So really welcome any interest or conversations that anyone's keen to have.
Absolutely. And I think the European Marine Energy Centre is such a good case study for islands, looking at not only using renewable energy, but also building a knowledge economy. I think often some of the challenges that islands have is that renewable energy projects take place, but that benefit doesn't always stay locally. And I think that centers like EMEC give that really good example of how to build local knowledge, attract people with jobs, and also attract investment. So for anyone interested, I would definitely recommend looking more into EMEC and some of the organizations around that as a good case study.
Absolutely.
Just to wrap up then, Inga, I know that there are a couple of important events coming up in Orkney over the next year or two, not least the Island Games, I think next year, is that right?
The Island Games, which I'm sure there must be a few people on the call that will know about this. So this is the International Island Games. This is a competition that's held every 2 years for island communities to participate in. I think it's something like the fourth largest multi-sports competition in something or other. I don't know. I'm not going to say a statistic and get it wrong. But it's certainly I understand it's the largest multi-sports competition happening in the UK next year. So 2025 in July. So yeah, I think everyone's very excited about that.
Great opportunity to building these different connections between islands as well, and showcase Orkney. So I saw, I think it was in the Channel Islands most recently, and there was a lot of great coverage of how that event had that impact locally. So no, that's fantastic. Well, Inga, I'm not sure if there's anything else from Orkney that you want to leave us with before we wrap up, or anything else that we didn't get to cover yet.
Oh, I'm sure there's lots, but it's probably that'll take another session to cover all those things. But thank you very much. It's been really nice having a catch up. And yeah, just reiterate, if anyone wants to get in touch, then my contact details are on LinkedIn, and I'm sure they'll be available somewhere. But you should be able to find me on a search engine, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And if failing that, our team will be happy to connect you to Inga. So thank you again, Inga. Really appreciate you sharing everything that's happening in the Orkney Isles, and look forward to continued collaboration in the future. Have a great rest of your day. Wonderful weekend.
Take care. Bye, everyone.